We'll call it New York versus New York. We are getting more details of what seems to be not just a manufactured but a real feud between Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio after they met on Wednesday in Albany. Apparently, the sniping started, and as usual, it is off-the-record comments that, let's say, adds fuel to the fire. Now, somebody in the mayor's camp was quoted as saying, "There is no strategy with dealing with Cuomo. The governor has all the power." Cuomo camp responded in kind, saying this: "The mayor thinks he can accomplish things by making political statements. The mayor is much more political, the governor more substantive." And it gets even more personal, apparently. They think that the mayor, this is from the Cuomo camp, is naive. He can give a speech, but he doesn't have the faintest clue about substance or governing, and vice versa. They think the governor is some giant meanie here who only reads weakness if somebody's trying to cooperate or capitulate. You may have some thoughts on that. There are some, the school of thought is the only way that you can get anything from the governor is to meet force with force. Anything else, he'll eat you alive. Is there validity to that?
Well, I'll tell you this. Regular people have no use for this stuff.
Yeah,
this turns people off so much. Get the work done. They really don't care whether these two guys like each other and have to out-man each other and out-ego each other. They want the work done, and it really turns people off.
But one I think that's slowing things down, isn't it?
Oh, it's a distraction. It's not helpful. Find a way to sit in a room and figure out we don't agree. Okay, let's find out what we can agree on. It's absolutely not helpful to the process, and it disserves our constituents. I am not a fan, as you can tell.
And it's not helpful to either one of them. I don't see how either one of them gets a leg up. I mean, I can see Cuomo looking to exert greater power and sort of put de Blasio in his place, and de Blasio trying to use what political muscle he has in terms of the progressive wing of the party. But it's very disappointing on both of their
Well, we know how this plays out, Andrew. There's horse trading, right? What does the mayor want? The mayor wanted, and he learned how he got out Fox in terms of the pre-K, right? In terms of credit and everything else. He wants control of the city schools, right? I mean, that's one of the big things he wants, and affordable housing in the city. What's the governor want that he wants to extract from him as a condition?
I mean, I think he wants the leverage to be able to flex the muscle in Albany because I think it's perceived that the mayor has a significant amount of influence within portions of the caucus. Yeah. I mean, how much influence does Mayor de Blasio have within the Democratic caucus in the Assembly?
Well, as I mentioned before, he came and spoke with us about substance, about issues. We have many New York City members, obviously a significant number. You know, it's a huge place, and our districts are 137,000, so you can do the math. We have a lot of members from New York City, not all of whom agree with de Blasio. They're not all progressive at all. We have conservatives from Brooklyn, Staten Island. But that being said, I think there is a sense that we as a conference are in sync with him about some things. I am in sync with him about some things and not others. We disagree. But, you know, there are things he wants, like the rent renewals, a strengthening of the rent laws, that are what we want. And we are going to fight together.
What does the governor want in exchange?
Support. I mean, look, the governor.
I'm not in the room.
Yeah. I think the governor is going to want support from New York because he's going to want to say, I have a track record. Look, I did the pre-K, moved that through the state, I moved affordable housing through the state. You know, whatever it is, if it's working with the mayor. But remember, the governor's already talking about running for a third term. He's already set up his 2017 campaign committee. But the fighting between the mayor and the state is not unusual. We saw it under Bloomberg, except for Bloomberg had $1 billion to start changing the pieces of the puzzle. I mean, the chess pieces, which I mean, he would support candidates with his money to push the agenda that he wanted. So he actually had more influence in changing things at the state than de Blasio does. De Blasio needs to be more strategic about how he's going to move his agenda because he needs to help with the state. New York City is a creature of the state, meaning that New York City has to rely on the state to pass legislation.
I'll say from the optics, and I've heard this from the regular person, they say they don't think the governor respects the mayor. And then there's an open debate as to whether he should or he shouldn't. But Cuomo, at least from the Andrew Cuomo I know, and this precedes him from being governor, he respects both strength, convictions here, and also you got to know how to play the game here a little bit. And if he doesn't think the guy's is suitable or his abilities are up to speed here, he's going to try and eat him alive. I mean, take a look at Schneiderman for a second here. Look at him as AG compared to what Andrew Cuomo was at AG. He tried to box Schneiderman in for 6 years. It's kind of worked, right? Now, he's kind of trying to find the line here.
Disagree.
You do?
Noted, disagree, yes.
I think the statement that of how the governor and his staff feel about the mayor, you just played it.
Yeah, I think it's real.
And I think, you know, I read the other day, just today, the governor took a shot at de Blasio being late, or actually being born or living in Massachusetts, because he was born in New York City but lived in Massachusetts, so he took a shot at him again.
What dumb is a Red Sox fan as a mayor?
Yeah,
but anyway,
so.
okay. All right, let's talk about, for you, the more significant thing, which is in Yonkers, School Superintendent Michael Yalazzo talking about his district's request to the state for $26 million in emergency funding. Take a listen.
My children deserve the same educational opportunities as every other student in Westchester County. Do not compare me to the Big Five. Compare me to Westchester County. That's where I live. That's where my schools are. That's where my kids live and go to school, and their parents. And their parents are voters. And the one thing I would say to Albany is, you know, children don't vote yet.
So, Andrew, what was the sense, and you're going to have this entire interview coming up this weekend on Newsbreakers, what was your sense? Is he worried what's going to happen?
I think he is. The backup plan, if they don't get the $26 million, are more than 100 layoffs of teachers and school administrators and an end to all sports programs in Yonkers. I mean, everything from football to intramural stuff. So they're looking at really severe cutbacks, and they say there's simply no other way to do it this go round. It's either all of those cutbacks or we get the $26 million. The problem is that they got $28 million from Albany last year because of a $50 million accounting error. They got another $28 million a couple of years ago in, I think, 2010, 2011. So at some point, there are legitimate questions about how much money Albany can push into the Yonkers school system, and is there a problem on the Yonkers end? Is there a hole in the bucket where the money keeps seeping out?
Legitimate questions, right?
It is a fair question, but there's sort of a two-part. There's a short-term problem that's really a crisis. Can you imagine a school district of 27,000 kids, no football, you know, no varsity sports? This is a district that had a history of being exceptional when I went there in sports and produced some great athletes.
You should have never left.
I wasn't good at football or basketball. They didn't have girls' sports then.
Oh,
but also, no art, no music, completely. My argument is that parents who have a choice are no longer going to want to move to Yonkers if this is the case, because you could buy a house somewhere else and at least your kid is going to have the basics of a quality education. This is an unacceptable cut. We can't do it. We are working with the governor's office to try to fill this hole and get through this. But we have a long-term problem. This is a perennial problem in Yonkers. It's lasted way longer than this accounting error. The parents are tired of it.
Is it there's not enough of a taxpayer base, or is it that,
no,
where's this money going?
Let me just say this. We fought to get $20 million more in state aid this year for the Yonkers schools. We got it in the budget. When every other district got more, Yonkers got more than any other of the Big Five. We got over 8%. We got $20 million in capital for Yonkers, fighting in Albany to get it. We have a perennial problem with a shortfall in the Yonkers budget. This is a district where the budget of this district and the city is a single document, and it's subject to review by the comptroller and the state education department because of the history of Yonkers. So the problem is we really need more revenue. We either need to increase our sales tax to the amount that it is in New York City. I don't think anybody knows in Yonkers what their sales tax is, but if we increased it 0.5%, we'd have $14 million more a year, and we want to see that money targeted for education so we're not in this hole. We could have a hotel occupancy tax so it would make a little more, just like we do in other communities. New Rochelle has one, for example. So there's some things we have to do. We have to find additional sources of revenue, and the city of Yonkers is going to have to make some hard choices in order to keep its schools afloat, because honestly, we cannot every year go back after the budget and beg for more. That's just not a way to run a district.
There are also spending problems in Yonkers. The teachers in Yonkers make, on average, close to, if not at $100,000 a year. It's one of the richer teacher contracts. Fire and police contracts are fairly rich in Yonkers as well. So yes, it's more revenue, but it's also, I think, staunching some of the spending that Yonkers goes through every year.
And to his credit, Mayor Spano, you know, has reached finally deals with most of the unions to address some of these issues and to start to pull back on some of the things that were very generous over the years, which I might add, prior mayors agreed to. The unions didn't make these up on their own. But we do have spending problems, and we do have a revenue problem, which is that it's because it's located next to New York City, the property tax values are high, houses are worth a lot, but you know, it's basically an urban environment. The district is 70% minority, and particularly the school district, very poor in terms of the majority of the students who attend the district, and we do not have the right pieces in place to avoid this occurring, and we have to fix that. We need a long-term plan so that we're not back every year. Dr. Urzullo's heart is totally in the right place. He has killed himself that these kids should not have this kind.
One more point, and I don't mean to keep cutting Richard off in this discussion, but imagine if they have to cut back on sports and after-school programs. You know, safety and crime is always an issue in Yonkers, or a concern in Yonkers. Now you send a couple of thousand kids home from school earlier than they would be every single day if there's no after-school sports, if there's no after-school programs. What does that do for their futures, for the overall safety of Yonkers? It really is all interwoven in terms of the
I agree. Mount Vernon had that issue too, where they had to drop some sports, but they were able to fundraise and figure out other ways to get revenue in there.
In fact, if I remember right, didn't Denzel Washington yell at you
when
you asked that question?
Yes, he did. Mount Vernon graduate Denzel Washington yelled at me when I asked him that question.
See? And then Yonkers also, like New York City, has an income tax.
Yes, a personal income tax.
Right, so there's a lot of taxes in Yonkers.
Which I know, and it was raised last year. You know, it's a tough situation. We are trying to keep the finger pointing down, which is another Yonkers historical problem.
Very good at it, yeah.
And we're trying to keep that down, find a solution, work on a short-term and a long-term solution. It's unacceptable that our kids, and after school is the least of it, it's what is happening in the school day that is not acceptable.
Just give an idea how many people are in Yonkers. I think people forget the size of the
city. It
city.
just went over 200,000.
Yeah, it's the fourth largest in the state of New York.
It went up. It went up over 200,000. I think it's going to be the third very quickly.
Wow.
Okay.
And the hippest, if you vote on LoHUD, it's the hippest city. We're in a very tight contest.
I was just there yesterday. I didn't feel too hip.
I had to get that in.
As I'm told, the director is also from Yonkers, and he validates the Assembly Women's Point. Yes. All right. Now you can catch the entire interview with the Yonkers School Superintendent, Michael Yazzaro, and Andrew's telling me he is an entertaining one on Newsbreakers. And again, that's with Andrew. It's this weekend on Fios 1 in the Lower Hudson Valley. Okay, coming up next. Maybe this time around, it's not the economy, stupid. Social issues like abortion, gay marriage, even marijuana dominating the conversation, and you might be surprised the direction the country is moving in.